Meet Omar. He's sitting in his car during his lunch hour, engine off, sandwich in one hand, cell phone in the other, doom scrolling through Instagram. He's watching reel after reel of people laughing, celebrating, enjoying their lives. Everybody else seems to be winning. He's sitting in the parking lot outside of his office in Los Angeles, and he has no desire to go back in. Omar is the director of talent acquisition at a mid-sized tech firm, at least for now, because recently he was put on a performance improvement plan. The feedback? Vague. The expectations? Unrealistic. The roles he was supposed to fill have gone unstaffed for months. And it's not because of a lack of effort. It's because the specs keep changing and hiring managers rarely respond. He feels like he's sprinting in sand. No structure, no plan, no momentum. His manager says he believes in him, but offers him no direction. The silence between meetings is the worst part. That's when the thoughts creep in. He thinks, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Maybe I'm just a failure. And he used to love recruiting. He used to love the energy, the people, the thrill of matching talent to an opportunity. But now it all feels mechanical, heavy, meaningless. It's like he's lost the plot to his own career. And he's not just afraid of losing his job. He's afraid of losing himself in a role that he feels is no longer the right fit. And the scariest part is that he has no idea what to do next. Today, I'm speaking with Julian Placino, a seasoned recruiting leader, keynote speaker, and founder of a successful media production company. With over 2 decades of guiding companies on hiring, branding, and leadership, Julian understands what it takes to thrive in high-pressure roles. His frameworks on resilience and stewardship offer more than just career advice, but a path to personal transformation. And I'm excited to hear how Julian would advise Omar on how to work through this adversity and how to turn all of this uncertainty into momentum. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. Julian, there's something on your website I wanted to ask you about because I was looking you up and you have a specific quote that got me curious. You said, "It has been a journey of self-deprecation to self-awareness." And I had to ask you about that journey. Tell me about the journey.
So I think that comes from a starting point for anyone who has a dream and wants to start a thing that is counter to the path that they have forged beforehand. Every time that you do something new, it's kind of scary, right? And for me, I sort of created a cushion of self-deprecation, of kind of protecting myself from failure or rejection or whatnot. But it was only through going through the fire of failure, rejection, and setback did I begin to have confidence in my own ability, because it was no longer theoretical, but it was lived experience in terms of the new competencies that I was developing by pursuing that dream.
Yeah. Would you say, Julian, because I hear this all the time, is it even possible to overcome these things without the experience? In other words, like, can you just think through it? Can you just learn about it? Or is it, hey, this is a necessary component to achieving more, to living a dream, to overcoming one's fears? You have to experience it.
So for the super analytical people who are listening and watching, who I'm assuming this audience is for, I am you. I am a high C on the disc profile, incredibly logical, sometimes to a fault. So my answer to that is this: do all of the preparation, all of the planning, all of the wireframing, all of that kind of stuff, but you've got to take action. There is power, beauty, and magic in that first step, and how it can create so much momentum by just taking that first step. So the answer is yes. You've got to take action, or nothing will change in your life.
Yeah. I feel it's the same way. Someone asked me the other day, they were like, Jay, how do you just get so zoned into your work and not get distracted? And at first I thought, I was going to maybe give the frameworks and all that. But here's the true answer. I was forced to, and I just did. Like, in other words, like, so when I worked at Tesla for years, right? If I didn't get something prepared in a very short amount of time, then I wouldn't be able to perform in my role. Like, and I had short windows to do it. So in other words, what I'm saying is it was the experience of having to really just zone in and just remove all distractions that built the muscle for me, not any framework that I learned that I had to apply.
If you want to talk about something tactical that is drawing from what you just mentioned, setting a deadline, right? Now,
Right.
It takes a very special person to set their own deadlines, but the majority of us are sort of forced into a position where you have to create or produce, right? Either way, find a way to create artificial, self-imposed, or actual deadlines, because there's nothing like being forced to create. And that draws out like the best version of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't self-imposed. It was imposed on me, but it built the muscle, right? It
Yeah.
built that muscle for me. So when I was sharing this with somebody, he's a good friend, I was telling him like similar, like you have to create that kind of environment for yourself, because he was someone who he gets very easily distracted. He's getting pulled left and right. And he's like, I never get done what I need to get done. Now, Julian, in your story, you mentioned on your website and you alluded to it here a little bit, which is you had some adversity that you had to overcome. And I always like to learn a little bit about that, because it gives me a sense of, what someone's gone through, and it gives the audience kind of a sense of what you've experienced. So what was some of that adversity early on, some of the things that you had to really work through, the struggles that you had, where maybe it's similar to what Omar is going through, but tell me a little bit about it.
I mean, at which chapter of my life, right? So you mentioned early on. So let's talk about the Genesis story. So my corporate background is in recruiting and staffing for the past 18 years. I'm a talent acquisition professional, right? So when I graduated from college back in 2005, I was actually overconfident in my ability to go get a job once I got my degree, because all throughout going through college, I actually built a very successful career in the retail space. I don't know if you're old enough to remember this company, but CompUSA. Do you remember CompUSA? It was like a
Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah.
So I was one of the leaders at CompUSA. I ran service centers. I was one of the youngest in the company, getting all the accolades and this and that. So I thought once I got my degree, I'd be able to get any kind of job I wanted, right? But over this 8-month period, I was rejected literally 37 times. Every type of rejection notice, I lost myself in the process, and I felt like the world didn't want me, right? But something was happening throughout that process, which of course I didn't see as I was going through it. I was learning how to shake hands, how to make eye contact, how to present myself in an interview, how to negotiate for salary. I was learning this definitive process of how to find a job. And then ultimately, the position that ultimately gave me my first chance at my first big boy job was a company called Robert Half International, which is one of the largest and prestigious staffing firms out there. And I began the role of a junior recruiter. So I found so much meaning in that suffering, because instead of spending every waking hour of my day trying to find a job for myself, I was beginning a career where I was still doing just that, but now in the service of others. And now, period to date, I have had the privilege of helping thousands advance their careers. So that was early on what that really deep, intense pain, suffering, and adversity was. I couldn't find a job, but then I built a career out of helping others find jobs.
You said something there that really hit home for me. You said, I found so much meaning in the struggle. Is that something that you recognize as a necessary component in how we deal with struggle? Like, in other words, I use this term, we're meaning making machines,
Mm-hmm.
whether we're aware of it or not. So how much weight do you place on that? Like needing to appropriate meaning to our experience?
100%, man. And you're right. We're meaning making machines. Where did I hear that? I heard that. Have you heard of the Landmark Forum? Is that where you got?
I've heard of it,
Okay. Right.
but I don't know if I heard it directly from there.
Yeah.
Truth be told, so years ago, I was connecting with people on LinkedIn just because I wanted to just meet people who were in the space that I wanted to be in. This was before I even got into coaching and speaking and everything. And one person I met, I can't even remember his name, but I can remember that conversation. And he used that term, we are meaning making machines. So maybe he got it from Landmark. I don't know. But it stuck with me ever since.
Yeah. And with my personality type, I'm always trying to seek meaning. And that's why that resonated with me. It stuck with me in terms of where I thought the source was. I think it's also related to the statement that nothing has meaning except for what you associate with it, which puts you at the place of power because you can create and design meaning, right? But the original question was, how do I use that story? How is that beneficial to me? Well, I give a keynote on resilience. And one of the steps that I do for my audiences is help them find that anchor story. And what I just told you was my anchor story. It's the story that you can anchor to whenever you experience deep amounts of pain and suffering to stop the spin of overwhelm. So what I asked them to do is to think about a time when you went through this incredibly challenging time, which of course tested your character, your self-belief, and everything that you thought. But ultimately, because of that experience, a greater good came about. Because if you can find that story at least one time in your life, you can use it and bring it into the present to give you power, strength, reassurance, and for those very logical-minded people, evidence that suffering can bring about a greater good.
I love that, because with evidence, you now convince the subconscious mind that this is actually something that could lead to something good. And then the subconscious mind can no longer call BS on it, right? Because that's what ends up happening, right? The subconscious mind says no, and everything's fueled. Well, most things are fueled by our subconscious. But what you just shared and what you ask an audience to do is point to that story that proves that the hard time got you to growth, development, learning, and so on.
Not in spite of it, but because of it. And there's two following steps. The first step, once you experience that adversity, is number one, go back to your anchor story. But you've got to do that hard work of self-awareness and sifting through the stories of your life so you can find that story that's deeply personal and meaning to you. Number two, ask yourself, what valuable lesson is this teaching me? It is forcing you to look into the space of the current and the present time of how is this actually working for your good? And then lastly, knowing this, what's my next move? We just spoke earlier about the importance of action, right? Now that you've got yourself in the right headspace, stopping the spin of overwhelm with your anchor story, and then asking yourself, forcing yourself, demanding of yourself the lesson that you're being taught during the season of life. Once that's there, ask yourself, what's the next move? And then take it.
And it doesn't need to be, it's 10 moves. Right? It doesn't need to be that you have all the blueprint designed and everything built out to where you know exactly what you're going to be doing. Because you mentioned before the high C personality types that could be listening, the people who want all the steps in place. You just need to know the next step, right? You just need to know what the next step is. And then here's the other part that I think is important. I want to get your thoughts on is there needs to be a component of trust, which is to say, okay, I'm going to take this next step, and I trust that when I'm there, I'll be able to know what the next step is after that.
Yes, two things come up for me. So I believe in God. I'm a Christian specifically, right? And there is often this saying that belief in God or trust in Scripture is like a lamp to your feet. Now, what is a lamp to your feet? A lamp to your feet doesn't cast far and beyond. It casts what's right below you. But it says the lamp will always follow you, right? So if you take that first step, you may not see what's a few steps ahead, but the lamp is still at your feet. To me, that is very much close to like what you're mentioned to in terms of trust. You have to trust that direction that you're going, right? You may not always have the full roadmap, which especially the high C types always want, right? But there is something about moving in the direction of your heart amidst uncertainty, because of uncertainty. And that's sort of that trust, it begins to grow because you'll have taken so many steps that you trust the process, that even though you don't know those future steps, it's still going to be okay.
Yeah. And Omar, his story, it's very related to what we're talking about here, because he has that worry in him about what's next. I don't know where I'm going. He feels so lost. What would you recommend in regards to how to help someone who they're stuck in this fear of like, well, I don't know what to do. Okay, I could take the next step, but what is it leading towards? Should I be staying at this job? Should I be looking for another job? And they get caught in that overthinking, right? In that paralysis. What do you recommend for someone who's going through that?
So first off, I mentioned to you before we started recording, like, who is this Omar? I need to know this Omar, because this Omar was literally me in 2000, I'd say 12 through 2019. So I was the head of recruiting for a mid-sized technology staffing or technology consulting firm. And I had the same things. I started all of the different side hustles that you can imagine, because the thing that was motivating me was freedom and autonomy. And the only way I could experience that the way that I saw it in my mind was through entrepreneurship and business. So I know what that tension is, to actually have a pretty good, safe, secure job, but an internal yearning of wanting to do something more. So first off, Omar, if you're listening to this, I feel you, brother. Okay. What is that thing? Okay. So first off, I want to tell Omar, or the people who are currently working, you are in a great place because you are not suffering financially. You actually have a pretty steady job that gives you the space and takes away the fear of like the finances, but you also have the freedom and the onus and the responsibility to figure out that thing that it is that you love. My suggestion is to do what Tim Ferriss says. He says sometimes it's too much pressure to go find your passion, right? But instead, find your curiosities. What are the things that kind of interest you? And then lean into that. In my case, it was podcasting. I work for a company that, for a true blessing, that once a year they'd allow us to do our own self project while we were at work. For 24 hours, we'd shut down the company. We could do anything we wanted. And me, I loved interviewing interesting people, this whole thing that we're doing right now. So I started a podcast. I had no expectations for success. As a matter of fact, I didn't want to make money doing it. I wanted to do it for the love of doing it. But the more that I did it, I saw that, oh my gosh, I have a competency for this. I'm enjoying the process. I was learning how to edit audio, how to book a guest, how to write copy. Like, it was just fun for me, right? But over time, as I continued to build that, others began to ask me to speak about the podcast and then help them create content. And then I got my first sponsor from Focusrite. I saw monetization opportunities that happened organically because I followed my curiosity.
Wow. And anyone listening who goes, well, yeah, I have a lot of curiosity. I'm just imagining. I have a lot of curiosity in this and that and then, but what is it going to lead to? Like, what is it? That's what I think people can get caught into. Well, how am I going to make a business out of that? Or what is it then going to lead to in a career trajectory and all? And what, Julian, what you're saying is drop all of that. Drop the outcome, drop the expectation, drop the agenda. Just keep pulling that thread of curiosity and see what unravels, see what unfolds. Am I right?
100%. Yeah. Because if you put the wrong metrics, particularly trying to make money out of a thing you've never done before, you're sort of setting yourself up for failure. Because whenever you're new at doing something, you're going to be bad, right? So there is something really amazing about looking for those curiosities and allowing yourself to play and explore what that thing could be. But the first step is that, especially if you're like an Omar and just deep overwhelm and you're not worried about money, you're just worried about meaning and purpose, go play, and you'll see how it'll expand your mind to new possibilities. And most importantly, it will feed your soul and give you life and energy, unlike what's happening at your job right now.
Yeah. Go play. I like the way you put it. Go play. What it reminds me of, there's a Taoist philosopher by the name of Chuang Tzu. He wrote this poem called "The Need to Win." Mm-hmm. Have you heard of this poem before?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to summarize it because I don't want to go through the whole thing. But essentially, what he says is, if an archer is shooting for nothing, he has all of his skill. If he shoots for a brass buckle, he's already nervous. If he shoots for a prize of gold, he goes blind and sees two targets. So essentially what Chuang Tzu is pointing to is when we are shooting for the prize, there's a need to win, we're attached to the outcome, we lose the skill, we lose the playfulness. But if we're just doing it for the love of doing it, then we end up getting to that outcome, and the outcome could be completely different than what we initially thought it would be.
Love it. Goosebumps. It's kind of like what Jim Rohn says. He says success is something you attract by the person you become, right?
Mm.
And if you lean into like what you said, which is just first do the thing for the love of doing it, you sort of become excellent at that thing, right? So when the opportunity comes to monetize, provide a service, be asked to speak about it or whatever, you'll be so good that that monetization opportunity will be organic. But I know, especially in this society that values instant gratification, sometimes it takes time to develop discipline, skill, and insight. But if you look at the top performers in the world, one thing that is consistent across all disciplines is that they all love what it is that they do. I don't know of a single person who's world class at something and says, dude, I hate this. You know? So there's another book, Ikigai. Have you heard of Ikigai? Yeah, it's that intersection of like what you're naturally good at, what you enjoy doing, and what creates value for the world. That intersection is something I think everyone should put on themselves and give themselves the responsibility to find, because whenever you find that, whatever that is, it's more than a job. It's like a calling and a mission.
Yeah. And what he has, Omar, in his job too, is he's struggling with circumstances that are putting him in a situation where things outside of his control are really affecting him. And so talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, when you had, because you were in that kind of role where things would be put onto your plate and you couldn't control certain factors, you know, let's say jobs filling or whatever it is. How do you handle it so that you can still be performing at your very best, but it not creating such distress like it is in Omar's story for him?
I wish we could come up with an example so it can be quite prescriptive, right? So one of the things that I read in the story is Omar was distressed because his hiring managers were not responsive, right? His months had gone unfilled. Positions had gone unfilled because of months of just, they have gone unfilled for months is what I'm saying. But one of the reasons, it wasn't necessarily Omar's fault, but it's because his hiring managers were unresponsive. Well, for me, I would have a conversation with that hiring manager and understand the why behind the role. Because if the position is going on months unfilled, I would question if there's actually a need behind this. And as a recruiter, it's impossible to focus on all things. If you focus on all things, you focus on nothing. There always has to be a priority of requisitions that you fill. And generally, whether it's a small or large organization, there is either a group of individuals or a person that acts as the source of truth to help you prioritize those requisitions, right? But I think that's an honest conversation between you and your hiring manager saying, hey, what's up? I provided you with all these great candidates. Why aren't you moving on it?
Yeah.
Is it getting to what you're wanting, though?
Yes. Yeah. What I can extract from that is in every situation any situation where you are relying on someone else to support your overall performance. And so it could be in the recruiting space, but it can be anywhere, right? Where there are other stakeholders or clients or whatever it is, and you're not seeing the action being taken by the other person. I appreciate your answer, which is don't beat around the bush. Just go directly to them and have that at times what could feel like an uncomfortable conversation to just be like, hey, what's up? What's going on? Why are we not taking action here? Why am I not hearing from you?
Yes, 100%. And there's a way to do it in a way that is gentle and respectful. And the cool thing about recruiting, at least, is that you can have data that supports you. You can say something like, I submitted to you 12 candidates over the past month, and I've got 0% feedback, right? So let the data be your argument for you. And generally, your hiring manager might not be your direct report. Your direct report might be your CFO or your COO or whoever it is. Someone will have a dotted line to that hiring manager that you can ask for aerial support for, who can help kind of move the needle and see what's going on in terms of the feedback, right? So there's different ways of doing it, but I would say be maniacal about tracking your metrics, your outcomes, because that becomes your case to have that uncomfortable conversation, but still putting you in a position where it's like, hey, we're working together to solve the needs for the business.
Yeah.
It doesn't
I
become
like what,
time. It's just like data now, So
yeah, and well, I think what you said there at the end is so important too, which is you then align it towards the mutual goals that you have between, let's say, this recruiter here and the hiring manager, but it could be also in any other scenario where the two people here involved all want the same thing. So what we have to do is just make sure that the other person understands that this is aligned towards a shared goal. And speaking of alignment, you said earlier, you said that you recognized that freedom was a value of yours. I guess what was some realization that came to you to be able to really pursue that? I mean, I guess in other words, it's not an easy thing to get into being an entrepreneur. What was, I guess, the motivator? Was there an instance, a story that you can point to of that made you really want to move in that direction?
Absolutely. It was pain once again. And what's really interesting, this keeps bringing back to the very beginning. There were so many lessons I learned there, right? So when I graduated from college, went through that whole odyssey of getting rejected 37 times, getting my first recruiting job. I loved that job. I was so hungry to make a difference. And all of that suffering through not being able to find the job made me a top producer in recruiting and helping other candidates find jobs because I could deeply empathize and understand what their problems were so I could coach them to success, right? So for 2 years, I became a top producer in terms of recruitment. As far as I was concerned, this forever will be my career, right? That was 2006 through 2008. What happened in 2008? Right. The Great Recession. So here I was, this young up and comer, finally getting my chance at this awesome job and being a producer, and the entire economy shut down. And when your job is dependent on the local economy hiring, and the economy isn't hiring, well, your job goes away too. So that was the very powerful moment of I had this job that I loved so much that I finally was in, and then I got fired because of the economic circumstances, right? So that was it. That was it. That was the rich dad, poor dad moment for me, which was like, oh my gosh, there is no such thing as job security. And it was such an embarrassing, humiliating experience. And I remember the day that it happened, like just like in the movies, they gave me the box to put my things in. And I worked, I think, on the 38th, 40th floor of the skyscraper in downtown. That was a long elevator ride down. And then I walked outside and it started to rain.
Oh, wow.
It was about maybe half a mile going from the building to the underground parking lot. And I remember I was just so sad and defeated. And that's when it began to like come up in me that I never want this to ever happen again. And that ultimately led me to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Napoleon Hill, Jim Rohn, Stephen Covey, just embracing the entire personal and professional development genre. And that's when I started to get these ideas of entrepreneurship in business and leadership development. And that's what set me on the path. It was that painful experience that shifted my desire to be nothing but a corporate executive to pursuing the path of entrepreneurship, freedom, and self-expression through business.
Yeah. It's I think Tony Robbins would say, right, it's when the pain of our current situation is so great that we then decide to make a change because the idea of change is not as painful anymore. And so, in other words, the pain of what you experienced was so much that taking the road less traveled didn't seem so scary anymore because you wanted to avoid that other pain that you were experiencing. And Julian, you have so much going on. I mean, you have so many ventures. And so I always get curious when I speak with someone such as yourself about what it is that you do regularly for yourself to be able to manage your energy, your focus, your own resilience day in and day out. Do you have practices? Do you have things that you always commit to ensure that you're always at the top of your game?
I have about a 2.5 to 3 hour meditation and prayer practice every morning. So I wake up about 4 o'clock in the morning and I do my readings, my scripture readings, and then I enter into a journaling practice. And that journaling practice I adopted partly from, have you heard of Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way?
No, I have not.
Okay. So one of the things that she does something called morning pages, where what she does is she just fills up 3 pages in her journal. The purpose of that is not to create art. It's not to overthink it. It's just to write stream of consciousness, whatever's in your mind, the monkey chatter, whatever you want to call it, on to a page, just to dump all the thoughts out. And then I go into another journaling practice where I sit in stillness. I pray, I ask God questions, and I write down these reflections that I have. And what's really amazing are sometimes these insights that come out of this sort of listening and being still are the most elegant and simple solutions to my most complex problems. And then
Mm,
I do some form of exercise. So that's kind of like how I lead my morning um, as soon as I wake up. So, and I've
wow.
been doing that for years now. So
Wow. By the way, there was a huge fly that just flew by. I don't know if you saw that on the camera.
I didn't see
My
it.
goodness. I don't, that thing is big. Anyone listening, if you watch the YouTube video, there was a huge fly that just went right by my face. Um, so, Julian, when you do the journaling, by the way, do you do that hand to paper, like paper, digital? I just get curious of these little things.
Yeah, like handwritten, you know. So yeah, and I have binders of this stuff. I think there's something about one of my mentors at Bottle Rocket, Calvin Carter. He's the founder of the company. He said he's a believer in physical presence, and I believe that. Also, there's we live in such a hyper digital world that these analog things, it feels real whenever you make it, whenever you create it. You know what I mean? So it's like there's something different about writing versus just typing something into the digital world.
I agree with you. And I know everyone has a unique way of doing things, and I don't like to project what's best for others. But I can agree with the fact that when I am writing, and I use a tablet at times, but I'm still using an Apple Pencil where I can actually write it out. But in a journaling practice, I also go pen to paper. I find it to be the most cathartic. I've had the most aha moments through that, not through typing. I just can't remember a time where I was typing something and I had this big moment of awakening through typing. It was always pen to paper. So okay. And with the books you're reading, you mentioned personal development. Um, this is just my own curiosity. What's like top three or the top one that comes to mind of the books that you've read?
You know, I think it's a pretty common one, but Rich Dad Poor Dad, and here's why.
Yeah.
Before I read that book, I was unfamiliar with the concept of passive income, right? I had a full time job since I was 18 years old, worked since I was 16, and it was always linear income show up, W 2, paycheck, whatever, right? It's like that's just the paradigm that I operated under. Like, I have to go work and then I'm going to get paid. But this idea of building an asset that spits out cash, and if you make enough of those and it meets and exceeds your expenses, that technically sets you free and gives you choice. That blew my mind. And there were different ways to do that through real estate, portfolio income, through business, things like that. And that began an 18-year journey of trying to figure out who I was as an entrepreneur. So
I love it. I love it. It's a completely different way of thinking. It's like we're all raised to believe, we're supposed to just find a job, make the money pays the bills, and then it's always this trade, time for money, time for money, time for money for our entire lives. What Rich Dad Poor Dad also did for me was gave me that wake up call of I don't need to trade time for money. There are pathways to be able to earn. And it doesn't mean that everyone has to quit their 9 to 5. There are ways you can do that if you love your job and you want to keep doing it, right? Go for it. But why not look at these other opportunities here to give yourself that kind of freedom? So, Julia, I always want to bring this up towards the end of a conversation because I always like to create the scenario where you have a chance to meet Omar. So let's say Omar is sitting in on one of your keynotes, hears you speak, is inspired by what you shared. And then after the keynote, you're chatting with him after, let's say, the group's there and you're meeting people in the audience one on one. And he tells you what he's going through. And knowing you would listen, you would acknowledge what he's saying, and then you may present a question or two to get him to start thinking a little bit differently and how to overcome what he's working through now and how to get to the other side. What would you ask Omar?
I mean, I just flat out ask him, what do you want to do? Like the So the common scenario people will ask you is, if you didn't have to worry about money, what would you do? Right. So I would actually throw the questions out in different ways that he's heard before, ways that he didn't, until we can actually get to the root of things, the substance, right? Because ultimately, and this is recruiting 101, Omar's going to know this. Like, the first thing you want to figure out is, what do you want to do? The hardest person to ever help in terms of a career search is the person who wants to be everything to everyone. But that's going to take work for Omar. Self-awareness. Do the hard work of self-awareness and figuring out what it is that you want to do. And if that seems too daunting, do the things. Make a list. Just make a list of things that you're curious about and things that you think you might want to do, right? And let's say it's a career path. Let's say let's say he wants to do TV journalism, or let's say he wants to be a real estate investor. Omar is a professional recruiter. So go find some of those people, take them to coffee, go buy them lunch, learn about their journey, because before they became a real estate investor, they were not. What was their path? What is their life like? So I think what I'm saying there is, find the people that you think you want to be like and get to know their friend. Get to know them as a friend, because their story represents a pathway to success, a methodology, certain steps that if you want to pursue that path can take as well. Is that helpful?
Absolutely. And what I know, and I know this would be the case if Omar presented this to you, that people who are in those positions that Omar might want to be in want to help. Like, you would want to help Omar. Like, if he asked you, right, for that coffee, you would say yes, wouldn't you?
Yeah, would love to.
Right. And that's, I think, so often gets overlooked. It's like, oh, well, I don't want to bother that person. Oh, but they're busy. No, like, people love helping others, especially when they see themselves in that person. They remember what it was like when they were in their shoes. Then it becomes like, no, I will drop a lot of things to be able to help you, because it's like helping a younger me.
100%. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, Julian, this was awesome, man. I feel like I could be talking to you all day, but anyone listening, I highly recommend checking out Julian's work. JulianPlacino.com. That's where you can find everything there, right on your website. JulianPlacino.com. We'll put it into the show notes as well. And you said also you're quite active on LinkedIn. That would be another great place to find you there, right? So, Julian, thank you, man. Thank you for taking the time today. Thank you for being so great and energetic and fun to talk to. This was incredible, and would love to have you on in the future again.
It's been my pleasure. I hope to meet Omar soon. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Julian has such great energy. I felt it listening back. I felt like the goosebumps in our conversation. We clearly have a lot of synergy. There's a lot of alignment in the things that I speak about, that he speaks about. And I went through and I, of course, put together the insights and the actionable takeaways for us. I think there are more than this, but I want to be sure I can give you what I think are the big nuggets to take away. So here are the three insights. Let's start with number one. Number one, I'm going to read word for word what he said. He said, "Only through the fire of rejection, failure, and setback did I begin to have confidence in my ability." Only through the fire of rejection, failure, and setback did I begin to have confidence in my ability, which suggests that taking action is a necessary component to all of this, and that failure is a necessary component. So we don't succeed in spite of failure, we succeed because of it. And we have to be able to appropriate the right meaning. So if you're going through a hard time, there's meaning in that suffering. There's meaning in that pain. And if you're really struggling to take action, set a deadline for yourself. At times it has to be self-imposed, but with a deadline, you can really move yourself into taking that action. Second insight, the lamp to your feet. I loved that visual, a lamp to your feet, which is being able to see this step and the next step. That's all is required. And to be able to trust the process. And I think he alluded to his faith. I think faith can really help here. To be able to know that you're going to be guided as you take the next step. You don't need to see the whole path. You just need to be able to look and see the next step. That's all. And the third insight is curiosity before clarity. Curiosity before clarity. That is, Go play. Get in the sandbox. Mess around a little bit. Find out what you're curious about. Find out what interests you. Then the clarity will come. Don't start with, I need to have all the plan figured out and create the blueprint. What are you naturally curious about? And then the clarity will come. Our actionable takeaways. First of 3, identify your anchor story. He talked about how we all have overcome so much in our lives, and I'm sure you have a story that you can reference that showcases your resilience. You've already overcome so much. And can you tap into that whenever you're feeling a bit stuck? Use it. It's evidence that you have, that you can get through whatever the challenge is that you're facing. Second actionable takeaway, be maniacal about your data. In any workplace, if you want to be sure that expectations are clear and that you're able to communicate your performance, be sure that you have the data that supports that. Be documenting that data constantly in the event that you need to support your case as to the work that you've done and the kind of expectations that are being imposed. Third actionable takeaway, he called them morning pages, where each day he journals a stream of consciousness and he listens, being still, identifying from that, what is it that you truly want? What are you able to reflect on and learn from? And I think that the journaling process that Julian referred to is a powerful method to do that. So to me, that is an actionable takeaway that anyone can apply through journaling or even just through self-talk. I've talked about audio journaling before, where that helps you to be able to see things from different angles and then come up with your own answers. Join us on Friday. I thought about this conversation with Julian and how it very much relates to a component of my keynote on resilience that I'd love to share with you. It's a 4-step framework. I recently shared this at Columbia University. It was very well received. And in it, we include a character in a story. Her name is Aria, where I'm going to tell you a little bit about Aria. I'm then going to walk you through these 4 steps. And it's a framework that anyone can apply to cultivate resilience and really manage through when we're facing seasons like what Omar was going through, how we can effectively overcome them, appropriate the right meaning, and build up the momentum to move in a positive direction. So that'll be on Friday. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.